Did you know Command & Conquer released back in 1995? What is going on YouTube? 2 Sketchy coming at you, and after 25 years, the remaster is well overdue. However, with all that time passed, people like myself need to find a way to refamiliarize themselves with the units and factions which defined the RTS genre. Whether you want to play the campaign missions, or even take your chances in online ladder anxiety-inducing multiplayer, this video is both a guide and a refresher, whether you're new or a veteran to Command & Conquer. And with that said,
welcome back, Commander.
That camera's still running.
This video will be broken up into 3 chapters: factions, gameplay overview, and build orders, plus some bonus tips. Anyways, let's start off with Chapter 1, Factions. This remaster includes 2 base games, Tiberian Dawn and Red Alert, plus their expansions, which includes 2 factions to play in both titles. The first game, known as Tiberian Dawn, takes place when a strange crystalline substance called Tiberium starts appearing on Earth. While the Global Defense Initiative, or GDI, attempts to control the situation, a faction called the Brotherhood of Nod, or just Nod, rises and attempts to destroy the GDI and embrace the Tiberian Age all for themselves. The second game is no other than Red Alert, which was originally meant to be a prequel to the original Tiberian Dawn. However, this takes place in an alternate universe in the Command & Conquer series. Here, Allied forces, which mainly consist of European nations like Great Britain, Germany, France, Greece, and others, battle the aggressive Soviet Union for control over the European mainland. That's both games and factions in a nutshell, and just enough information to remain spoiler-free. However, now that you're more familiar with the who, what, where's, and whys, let's dive deeper into each faction, starting with the GDI. GDI's idea is using expensive, heavy armor, which is slow, but has overwhelming firepower. All of GDI's vehicles have relatively high HP, with the exception of the Orca aircraft, which is fragile. Their strategy is reinforced by GDI's endgame units, the Mammoth tank with its heavy armor, slow speed, and firepower of dual cannons and missiles. The rocket artillery, however, is relatively slow but still mobile, and does powerful damage to vehicles and tanks alike. In combination, these 2 units can be very difficult to beat. On the other side, the Brotherhood of Nod adopts a more hit-and-run tactic, opting for units that are fast, inexpensive, or have an advantage in the long-range department. Their recon bikes and stealth tanks are a classic example of this. One of Nod's endgame units is called the Kam Warrior, which is effective versus infantry, just like their flamethrower unit. However, it's also potent versus armor. Besides being diverse like that, this unit can walk through Tiberium without taking any damage. This matters because in Red Alert, resources are replaced with ore, which do not harm infantry units. Another benefit the Kam Warrior has is longer range than the Flamer, so it's the perfect rendition to harass the enemy harvesters, whether on foot or even dropped by Chinooks. I could go into a lot more detail. However, this is stepping out of the boundaries of a beginner-friendly video, and future guides, counters, build orders will be in order to be able to explain that in depth. So, leaving a like on this video will help drive these into reality. Alright, so the GDI is expensive and hard-hitting, while the Brotherhood of Nod is cheap and fast. With that, I hope this helps you when it comes time for you to choose your faction that fits your playstyle. While there are some similarities between the 2, the progress to unlock the units and buildings you want will vary due to their difference in both of their tech trees. Leaving the Tiberium era behind us and entering the alternate history, let's now talk about the 2 factions that are playable in Command & Conquer Red Alert, Allies and Soviets. Note that you will see some similarities to the previous game we just talked about. Allies and Soviets are vastly different, and not in a good way depending on who you ask. Soviets, back in the original version, were always the more dominant factions in the right situations or high resource maps. The problem was firepower, like the GDI. The longer you let Soviets gather a massive force, the harder that hammer would drop. Only in perfect conditions and superior micro would the Allies have an advantage with their light and medium tanks, or even naval units like the cruiser if the map consisted of water. The Soviets, on the other hand, have heavy tanks and the mighty HP recovering Mammoth. To top it all off, this remaster will not be rebalancing that gameplay. So, all of this still remains true to this day. However, things were different back in 1996. Clinton got re-elected and Pokemon was introduced to the world. We, as the RTS community, have developed our skills over the past 25 years. We discovered APM and have shared countless of articles, guides, tips, and tricks to overcome the asymmetry of Command and Conquer. Soviets might have better tanks, but they cost more, like a lot more. They might have a slew of aircrafts to choose from, but Allies have anti-aircraft guns, so that's the perfect counter. Soviets might have shock troopers, killer attack dogs, and flamethrowers, but the Allies can retaliate in numbers and speed because they're cheaper, and use their chrono shift ability, which allows them to teleport from point A to point B. They can attack with long-range cruisers from the sea even, or infiltrate the enemy with spies to gain information and use thieves to steal their resources. In conclusion, Soviets, firepower and brute force versus Allies, fast and intelligent. I hope that helped you grasp what to expect when diving into this and choosing a faction that you'd be interested in playing. Obviously, I'm missing out some content here and there because of, well, said expansions. However, I'd like for you to discover them yourselves. If, for any reason, you do have questions, go ahead and slide them down below, as either me or a Command & Conquer veteran will be more than happy to help you. And if we don't, just build more tanks. That's the simple answer to anything in Command & Conquer. Just build more tanks. There you go. Chapter 2, Gameplay Overview. Some differences arise when playing both Tiberium Dawn and Red Alert. Besides the units themselves, let me show you some things I wish I knew sooner when diving into Command & Conquer. Outside of campaign missions, each standard PvP or PvE skirmish will start with 10,000 credits. Now these numbers can be adjusted in the pre-lobby area. Unlike other RTS games, this is the only resource needed to play Command & Conquer. While you start with 10,000, this resource still needs to be gathered from ore or gems, even Tiberium, using your refineries, which spawn harvesters who can automatically gather and store funds for you. I've mentioned this before, but please note that the Tiberium ore in Tiberium Dawn, or just the first Command & Conquer, is harmful to infantry units as mentioned in the previous chapter. Only Kam Warriors and vehicles can traverse this safely. You will want 2 refineries or 2 harvesters early in the game in order to be competitive. If you have more money, you can beat your opponent by overwhelming them with units. Generally, at any point in the game, there is a trade-off between expanding your economy, building more units, and increasing your tech level. We'll get into that. And just a quick tip, you should always try to maintain your economy below 5,000 while pushing out units and expanding and making more buildings. Just an overall rule of thumb. If for some reason you're above 10,000, you might need to work on some of your macro. Alright, let's expand upon these points and phases in the standard game that I just mentioned, beginning with the starting phase. In this phase, you just started to build your base and have very limited structures, seldom any defenses, and just a couple of infantry units. This is the beginning of your economy and lasts about 1 minute. Expansion phase. Your base is still under construction. You have some defenses and infantry out. Economy is slowly increasing and you are expanding to conquer more ore, about 1 minute to 3 minutes in. In some circumstances, if fast attack build order is used, you might even have some aircrafts by now. Production phase. Now this is anywhere between 3 to 7 minutes and your base has a decent amount of defenses as well as small infantry units. Light tanks, artillery, and even rockets are possible at this time. At this point, you are looking to expand and produce an army that's ready to attack. Attacking phase. Your economy is in full time. Players at this point are engaging with each other and super weapons are being used if possible. Usually things are going crazy and haywire here, and if the game lasts this long, congratulations. This is anywhere between 13 to 18 minutes. Standstill and endgame phase. The teams at this point are at a standstill because all the ore is used up, no armies are left, and super weapons have been destroyed. Teams at this point are most likely balanced, depending, but usually this is where the standstill happens and endgame happens anywhere between 18 to however many minutes you decided to play, if, again, it ever lasts this long. At this point, you should be typing GG, if not anytime sooner. And that's pretty much concluding Chapter 2. It's some basic gameplay overview I thought that you should know. Now, let's start with Chapter 3, where I go into more detail based on what you should be building. So, Chapter 3, Build Orders. I've compiled some build orders targeted at beginners for both games, and understanding them is going to be key, so you know why you're doing what you're doing. That way, you can expand upon them once you get more familiar with Command & Conquer. Most players perfect their build orders, and experienced players even have several build orders for different factions and even maps. It'll be up to you to edit them and find what works best for you. In this example, we prioritize the barracks before the refinery, meaning we have more forces on the ground, you can scout sooner, you can even attack and harass sooner, but at the cost of getting some income. So we immediately follow up with a refinery afterwards. So it's deploy, power plant, barracks, refinery, barracks, refinery, and then war factory, etc. You might be asking, why would you build two of the same building, for example, two barracks? The more of said building you have, whether barracks or even war factories for tanks, the faster units will be produced, if you have the income to support it, of course. Speaking of economy, you should always try to make sure that your harvesters or ore trucks go to the closest ore refineries, and that they are also close to the ore as much as possible. You can as well sell unused buildings, such as refineries, near empty resource patches, saving you some money, and eventually you'll be able to use that money for something more productive. This next example, while only slightly adjusted, allows for fast tanks and a boom in your economy to help you expand. Deploy, power plant, refinery, barracks, war factory, refinery, service depot. Then just go tanks, tanks, tanks after that. You should even get more factories if you wanted to. Overall, it's important to have 2 to 3 refineries before you start mounting an attack. This way it'll help you maintain a good curve of income while constantly pushing out units from buildings. So even if an attack failed, for example, recovering from it won't be too hard. Note, please do not skip the barracks or the Hand of Nod, which produce your infantry units, because scouting early is very important. The fog of war, once revealed, will stay revealed, unless the enemy has some sort of line of sight blocker, which they won't in the early game. Try to reveal as much as possible of the map with your grenadiers, flamers, minigunners, or even riflemen. That way you can not only find other opportunities to expand and grow, but also prepare yourself for inevitable attacks seeing the enemy approach your base. There are plenty of other things you can try and achieve, like fast helicopters, or a full infantry rush with an engineer to capture the enemy buildings and sell them, or even use them yourself. But I think the information in this video is a good starting point and will suffice for now. So I hope it helps. Command & Conquer is the sole reason that I play RTS games today, and it's great to be able to contribute years later after its initial release. If you want more content like this revolving around Command & Conquer, obviously let me know. I'm right here. And other than that, I'm too sketchy, and I'm out. Peace.